welcome criminal defense attorney Michael Bixon. Welcome you back into the studio,
Thanks
Michael. Always great to have you here. Thank you so much. And we were talking just off camera during the commercial break, and you mentioned that it surprised you that the defense gave notice that they would no longer be seeking a mental impairment or a CTE defense in this case. Why does that surprise you, please?
So the CTE defense hasn't been used before. And to be clear, what CTE is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And I hope I actually pronounced that right.
I believe you did.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
very good.
Thank you. But what it essentially is a brain disorder that's caused by repetitive blows to the head. And it produces symptoms that can increase aggression, depression, emotional instability. And for a while, a lot of people thought that the defense might be going that route. Which is very interesting because it had never been used before. Aaron Hernandez is a very famous example of this, and part of the reason why I think they might not have gone this route. In Hernandez, in his case, they thought that he might actually have CTE. The problem with it is you can't 100% diagnose it unless it's done through an autopsy. And obviously, not too many criminal defense attorneys are going to be too comfortable with that thought, with that happening with their clients. So, if they were to actually go forward with that defense, they were going to have a lot of issues in actually proving it, not to mention that the burden would have been on them to prove it. The question of whether or not they had just brought it up to throw up some smoke and mirrors for the prosecutors, that's certainly a possibility. We do know that they had reached out to several experts to have Mr. Winslow tested for this, at least to the best that they could. But the question becomes, did they just throw it up to, for the smoke and mirror effect for the prosecutors to confuse them as to which way they were going to actually take the case, or whether or not they were really legitimately considering it? I think that there were issues with it if they did decide to go forward with it, the burden being on them, namely that they'd actually be admitting to what happened, just saying that he was basically mentally incapable of understanding what he was doing at the time.
Right.
It would have brought up some good appellate issues, I think, if he had been convicted, but it's not to say there weren't a bunch of issues for him during trial if they did go forward with that defense.
Sure. It's something interesting that I saw that I know that the defense filed a motion, and it was granted, to exclude some evidence found at Kellen Winslow's home relating to internet pornography searches, and they said they wanted to exclude anything that especially involved the elderly. Now, what was also interesting was the deputy district attorney told the court that while there was an extensive quantity of pornography found on the home computer, none of it involved the elderly. But the judge said that if a mental impairment defense was raised, then this could be introduced by the prosecution. So I wonder if they thought, well, the juice may not be worth the squeeze. If this comes in, it might lead us down a slippery slope. Perhaps the diagnosis just wasn't there. Could be for a whole host of reasons.
Oh, definitely.
But certainly interesting. And as you pointed out, it would be an affirmative defense putting the burden on them. So that's obviously the prosecution always carries the burden, except in cases you know this well, like this.
And it didn't used to be that way. I think in the 80s it changed, where now it's on the defense to actually prove that burden. There was a big outcry and sort of this lashback of the people saying that this is something that the defense is putting forward. The burden should be on them. That's when it sort of changed. And so it's a very tough defense to bring forward. Very few cases that actually win. And I think his defense did recognize that as well.
Right. Okay, Michael, we'll appreciate your sharing your thoughts, your expertise with us. We're going to take a quick break. A lot is straight ahead. We are expecting to hear from Jane Doe number 1 today. The first victim, alleged victim, I should say, in this case is expected to take the stand today. We're not sure if she'll be called first or what the order will be, but that's big testimony expected to come. As soon as they go back into the courtroom, we will take you there live. Right now, stay with us during this quick break.
I'm going to order that you have no contact, however, with the remaining jurors. You can say goodbye to them, but don't have any contact or discuss the case with them, okay?
Yes, sir.
And I want to thank you for your willingness to serve. I know you're kind of put in a tough spot here, and the circumstances have changed, but I think both parties and the court agrees you would have been an excellent juror in this case, and we're sorry to lose you, but thank you very much for your willingness to serve. All right, have a nice day. I'm sorry.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. Thank you for being with us. We are following the case of the state of California versus Kellen Winslow II. Court is now underway. We want to get you in there live. We want to remind you, you are expected to hear graphic testimony today. We're expected to hear from Jane Doe number 1 at some point today. On the stand, the first witness called by the prosecution, investigator Deputy Sean Dwyer.
what is your current assignment with the Sheriff's Department?
I'm currently assigned to the Encinitas Patrol Station.
Are you in fact a patrol deputy?
Yes.
So can you tell the jury what a patrol deputy is?
I respond to radio calls, calls for service, and then also responsive patrol.
What does that typically mean in terms of what you would have to do on a day-to-day basis?
The majority of my day does consist of responding to radio calls throughout the city of Encinitas, and then during downtime, we're expected to conduct proactive patrols.
Now, as of June of 2018, a little less than a year ago, were you also working in a patrol deputy capacity?
I was.
On June 7th of 2018, were you patrolling and responding to calls for service in the city of Encinitas?
I was.
Can you give us an idea of the area that the Encinitas substation, also known as the North Coastal substation of the Sheriff's Department, what area it patrols?
We're responsible for the main city of Encinitas, Rancho Santa Fe, Solana Beach, and Del Mar. And my direct responsibility was the Olivenhain area of Encinitas.
And as of June 7th of 2018, were you patrolling in the Olivenhain area of Encinitas?
I was.
Did you respond to a call for service?
I did.
Did you in fact respond to a neighborhood that is located off of North El Camino Real in the city of Encinitas that day?
That's correct.
On that day, did you receive a photograph of a large SUV?
Yes.
What type of vehicle was it?
It was a Hummer H2, the truck model.
When you say that it's a truck model, can you explain what you mean?
The standard looking Hummer with a small truck bed.
Now, did you receive a photograph of that Hummer parked within a neighborhood?
Yes.
Did you also receive a photograph of that same Hummer and its specific license plate?
Yes.
Did you ultimately contact an individual who was driving that same Hummer that afternoon?
Yes.
What time was it that you responded to the call for service?
May I refer to my report?
Yes, if it would refresh your recollection.
The original call for service was at 14:30 hours, 2:30 hours.
Would that be 2:30 in the afternoon?
Yes, sir.
And what time was it when you contacted an individual who was driving the Hummer H2?
May I refer to my report?
Please do.
It was about 1700 hours.
Would that be 5 o'clock in the evening?
Yes, sir.
When you contacted the individual who was driving the Hummer, did you see who it was?
Yes,
Do you see that person in court today?
I did.
Can you state where that person is seated and what he is wearing for the record?
He's sitting at the defense table wearing a dark blue suit.
All right, what color tie is he wearing?
I can't see it.
You can stand up if you need to.
It's yellow.
Okay, the record will reflect identification of the defendant.
Thank you, Your Honor. When you contacted the defendant that day, did you in fact take his photographs?
Yes.
Did you speak with him that day?
Yes.
In addition to taking his photographs, did you, as well as another deputy, collect a DNA reference sample directly from him?
That's correct.
Can you explain to the jury what you do and what the process is for collecting a reference sample of DNA?
We have a prepackaged kit with 2 oral swabs. They're basically large Q-tips. We swab each side of the individual's mouth. A plastic cap's pulled over the Q-tip, and then it is sealed in an envelope with an evidence seal and signed, and then the evidence was passed to a detective.
So first let me ask you about how you received training in order to collect a buccal swab. Is that what that's known as, simply a buccal swab?
Yes, sir.
Where is it that it's collected from in order to obtain someone's DNA?
Generally from the inside of the individual's mouth.
When you say the inside of the mouth, do you actually rub it against the cheek?
Yes.
When was it that you first initially received training in order to collect buccal swabs?
I had initial training in the academy and then follow-up training when I went out to patrol.
Who would provide the training when you were on patrol?
It would have been my training officer.
How long do you spend with a field training officer with the Sheriff's Department before becoming independent and working on your own?
A minimum of 4.5 months.
On June 7th of 2018, were you working with another deputy as you collected the DNA?
I was.
Who was that?
It was Deputy Hoodenpyle.
Can you spell that for the record?
It's Hoodenpyle.
Who was it that physically removed the DNA sample kit and collected the buccal swabs from the interior portion of the defendant's cheek?
Deputy Hudenpaw.
Were you present when that was done?
I was.
Did you in fact explain to the defendant what you were doing and what Deputy Hudenpyle would be doing?
Yes, sir.
After Deputy Hudenpyle physically collected the buccal swabs, what did he do with them?
He placed them inside the envelope, which I then sealed.
When you say that you sealed it, can you just explain specifically what you did with the Q-tips or the buccal swabs themselves?
So like I said, the cap was pulled over the tip of the Q-tip and then placed inside a yellow envelope, which is clasped, and then a red evidence piece of tape is placed over to seal it officially.
After you sealed the sample that had been collected from the defendant you identified in court, you mentioned that you provided it to a detective, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What was the name of the detective that you provided it to?
Detective Johnson?
Would that be John Johnson from the Sexual Assault Unit of the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, sir.
And when you provided it to Detective Johnson, was that so it could be impounded as property and evidence under Sheriff's Case Number 18124974?
The only case number that I have access to is the original one that I wrote.
Okay, and as far as Detective Johnson's investigation or the case number associated with him, that was separate from at least your initial participation, is that right?
Correct. It was same individual, different case numbers.
Okay. Now, once you had provided that evidence item to Detective Johnson, is it fair to say that you had no further participation with the DNA aspect of the investigation?
That's correct.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross?
Briefly, Your Honor. Officer, were you the actual one who swabbed the inside of Mr. Winslow's cheek?
No, sir.
It was Detective Hubler?
Deputy Hudenpaw was the one that physically did the swab.
But you were standing there watching him, right?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Winslow completely cooperated, right?
Yes, sir.
Willingly gave you that sample, right?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further.
All right, anything further?
Actually, if I may reopen, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
Very briefly. I neglected to show you a couple of exhibits. I apologize, Deputy. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing you first what's been marked as People's Exhibit 7 for identification. And I'm going to show you a series of exhibits. First, do you recognize what's in People's Exhibit 7?
Yes.
And I apologize, I will refer to them as Court's Exhibits. Looking at Court's Exhibit 7 for identification, do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
And who is that?
That is the defendant.
Did you take that photograph?
I did.
Was that taken on June 7th of 2018?
Yes, sir.
And what does that show a close-up of his face and shoulder area?
Yes, sir.
Showing you Court's Exhibit 8 for identification. Is that also the defendant in a photograph taken that day?
Yes, sir.
And does it show him from head to the toe in overall view?
Yes, sir.
Do you see that he's wearing a cut-off t-shirt with his arms exposed?
Yes, sir.
Is that what he was wearing when you contacted him in the Hummer H2 driving in the city of Encinitas?
That's correct.
Showing you Court's Exhibit 9 for identification, does that show the left arm area, an overall shot of the tattoos extending from his forearm up to the top of his shoulder?
Yes, sir.
Showing you Court's Exhibit 10 for identifications that also show now the right side with his right arm exposed with the tattoos shown from his wrist area to his shoulder.
Yes, sir.
Now showing you Court's Exhibit 11 for identification. What is that, Deputy?
That is the vehicle that I described earlier, the Hummer H2.
And is that a photograph that was provided to you by a civilian?
Yes.
Black Hummer H2 of its license plate.
Yes, sir.
And is that 7VQT 751.
Correct.
And was that photograph also taken and provided to you by a member of the public?
It was.
Do each of court's exhibits 7 through 12 fairly and accurately depict what we've described?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, any cross?
Briefly, Your Honor. Deputy, so you examined Mr. Winslow, right? You actually took those photos.
Yes, sir.
And you took a photo of all of his tattoos, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you see any tattoos on his arms that resembled a chain link, like a dog chain going up his arm to his wrist?
I do not recall.
Okay. And you looked at both of his arms, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And those were the only tattoos that he had is what you took a photo of, right?
Yes, sir.
And you don't remember seeing any sort of chain link tattoos on either of his arms? Either of his arms, is
No,
that
sir.
right?
No, sir.
Nothing further.
Right, just to be clear, you asked the question in the negative and asked if that was right, so I'm not sure what the answer was. So, do you remember seeing any sort of chain link tattoos on either of his arms?
I do not.
Okay, that just clears it up. Any other questions?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Any redirect?
No, thank you.
All right, can this witness be excused?
You may.
All right. Mr. Watkins, can this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Deputy. Have a nice day.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that he be subject to recall, not that I expected it would be an issue.
Okay, well, then you are subject to recall. You are not excused at this time, but he can leave for the day, correct?
You can.
Okay, but you're still subject to recall.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next witness.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. The people call San Diego Sheriff's Detective Michael Benavides.
You do solemnly state that the testimony you are about to give in the matter now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you would, please have a seat at the witness stand.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good.
And if you would, please state your name and spell your first and last name for the record.
Michael Benavides, first name is spelled M-I-C-H-A-E-L, last name spelled B as in boy, E-N-A-V-I-D-E-S.
Thank you.
All right, direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Detective Benavides.
Good morning, sir.
Can you please tell the jury what you do for a living?
I'm a sheriff's detective for the county of San Diego.
How long have you been a sheriff's detective with the County of San Diego?
About 8 years,
How long have you been a member of law enforcement in total?
22 years.
What were some of your prior assignments before becoming a detective?
Prior to being a sexual assault detective, I was an area detective at the Encinitas Station, which is now the North Coastal Station. I work patrol, I work in our SWAT team, I work community-oriented policing. I worked in jails for 4 years.
You mentioned that you're currently a sexual assault detective. Can you explain to the jury the way the San Diego Sheriff's Department is organized in terms of the sexual assault unit versus area investigations versus patrol deputies who work at the substations?
As a sexual assault unit, our unit handles, our criteria is different than, say, an area detective from a patrol station. We handle all felony sexual assaults that involve serious bodily injury, stranger and unknown suspect rapes, as opposed to, say, date rapes that the area detective would handle. High-profile cases, felony statutory rape cases, any series, a rape series in the county of San Diego.
Is there in fact a age-based dividing line between cases that would be handled by the sexual assault unit versus cases that may be handled by the child abuse unit or the family protection unit within the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, sexual assault handles ages 14 and above. The child abuse unit handles 13 and below.
And is that in fact a reflection of the status of the law in terms of various crimes that may apply at the age of 14 or over versus younger than 14?
Yes.
Now, what sort of training did you receive in order to become a sexual assault unit detective?
Been to the basic sexual assault course, which is 40 hours. We also receive field evidence collection, another 40 hours. We go to a basic investigations course. We also go to some advanced sexual assault or even child abuse courses as well.
Does some of that training include the collection of evidence that would be specific to sexual assault investigations?
Yes.
What would be one of the hallmark features of a sexual assault case that is different from other types of investigations in terms of evidence collection?
For a sexual assault case, our victims generally get what we call as a SART examination, where a forensic nurse examines and collects evidence from our victim, and we participate in that interview process.
In addition to a potential SART kit or a rape kit that's commonly referred to in the media or in public discourse, as a sexual assault detective, do you also personally attempt to retrieve any clothing and or bedding or other materials that may be relevant to your investigation?
Yes.
Now I want to ask you about your investigation into a case that was reported to have occurred on March 17th of 2018 involving a woman who we're going to refer to as Jane Doe number 1. As of March of 2018, were you a detective in the sexual assault unit?
Yes.
How long had you been a detective in the sexual assault unit at that point?
About 1.5 years.
During the course of your 1.5 years in the sexual assault unit, approximately how many sexual assault investigations have you conducted?
Probably over 50. You should generally have 1 or 2 cases a week.
In addition to that 1.5 years in the sexual assault unit and the 50+ investigations you had done, had you also investigated reported sexual assaults as an area detective?
Yes.
Approximately how many would you say you investigated?
Probably close to 100. I spent 5 years as an area detective.
So then, in March of 2018, how was it that you were ultimately assigned the case involving Jane Doe 1?
It was considered an unknown or stranger rape, so that met our criteria as part of being a sexual assault unit.
When you use the term unknown or stranger rape, what do you mean by that?
Where the suspect is unknown to the victim.
So then, in that sort of a scenario, is that when the sexual assault unit would be assigned the case, a detective such as yourself versus an area detective working at a substation?
Yes.
Was there a point in time when you then took over the investigation after it had been initially reported through the substation?
Yes.
Do you recall specifically when you were assigned the case?
Can I refer to my notes?
Yes, if it would refresh your recollection.
March 26, 2018.
And would that, in fact, be within a week of when the initial report came in on March 21st of 2018?
Yes.
Now, once you were assigned the case, is it fair to say that you needed to conduct some follow-up investigation?
Yes.
Was there a point in time where you received information from Sexual Assault Unit Detective John Johnson where you realized that there were some commonalities between your case and a case that he was investigating?
Yes.
Was the sheriff's case number you were investigating 18115-149?
Yes, correct.
And was the sheriff's case number that Detective Johnson was investigating 18124974?
Yes.
Now, after you and Detective Johnson began to compare notes and discuss the ongoing investigations that each of you had been assigned, was there a point in time where you met personally with Jane Doe 1?
Yes.
Did that take place earlier in your investigation?
I'd say early meaning time frame, probably within a couple months, 2 months.
Okay. Was that in fact in May of 2018?
Yes.
Did you also meet with her on a second occasion on June 12th of 2018?
Yes.
When you met with Jane Doe number 1 on June 12th of 2018, did you ask her whether or not she had retained the clothing that she had worn on March 17th, 2018, the day that she stated she had been assaulted?
Yes.
Did she tell you she had?
Yes.
Did you, in fact, retrieve and recover the clothing that she had been wearing that day?
Yes.
What items of clothing did you recover?
Pants and underwear.
Can you describe the pants that she provided you?
It was a white leather pants, and the underwear was the women's underwear, pink in color.
In terms of the pants, can you describe the condition of them?
It was white, leathery, and I saw some stains on the pants.
Can you explain to the jury the process that you follow in order to collect items of evidence in a sexual assault case, specifically clothing that may contain biological matter?
I separate each item and package them separately, seal them, and I then submit it into our main evidence for processing.
What do you use in order to seal the items as you process them separately?
Use tape, and then we initial and date over the tape and onto the package.
And what type of
You were
package?
watching live testimony from Detective Michael Benavides. He is with San Diego County Sheriff's Department. He is the detective assigned to investigate the complaint brought by Jane Doe number 1. We're going to take a quick break. We'll take you back in the courtroom right after this. You are watching Court TV Live. Thank you so much for being with us on this Tuesday afternoon. I'm Julie Grant. We are bringing you gavel-to-gavel coverage of the case of the state of California versus former NFL star Kellen Winslow II. We do want to warn you, what you will be hearing today is very graphic testimony. Right now on the stand is the detective who was assigned to investigate the sexual assault claim made by Jane Doe number 1. He was just telling the court about how he collected clothing items from Jane Doe number 1. Let's listen back in live. Okay, and as you can hear, it's quiet in the courtroom. He was just talking about how he met with Jane Doe number 1 on 2 occasions, asked her for the clothing that she was wearing on the date of the alleged sexual assault. He testified that date was March 17th of 2018. Right now, someone is taking the oath here. We can hear it faintly, but someone is being sworn in the courtroom. There you see Kellen Winslow II seated next to 2 of his attorneys. There were 3 attorneys on his defense team. I'm trying to listen and I'm not really hearing much.
Please state your name.
Okay, and it sounds like another
First and
witness
last
perhaps
name for
has
the
taken
record.
the stand.
Kelly Hensley.
Kelly Bensley, let's listen in.
Hensley.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Ms. Hensley.
Good morning.
Direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Hensley, can you tell the jury what you do for a living?
I am a criminalist in the Forensic Biology Unit of the San Diego Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory.
What does that mean?
My job duties are to process items of evidence for biological fluids, develop a DNA profile if I am able, and compare that DNA profile to the items of evidence and other known items from known individuals, those are reference samples, to try and determine who may have left DNA on an item of evidence.
How long have you been with the San Diego Sheriff's Department Crime Lab?
Almost 11 years.
And in those 11 years, have you worked as a criminalist in the Forensic Biology Unit continuously?
Yes.
How often would you say that you conduct analysis on DNA items?
Every day, technically. I'm doing some part of the DNA process, whether that's working in the laboratory or doing desk work, issuing reports and doing data analysis.
Is it fair to say that you've tested thousands of items to determine whether or not an individual has left DNA behind on them?
Yes.
Prior to your experience with the San Diego Sheriff's Department Crime Lab over the last 11 years, did you have prior experience as an analyst in the area of DNA analysis?
Yes.
And what would that experience be?
I began working in the first DNA laboratory in 2001. I worked at a laboratory called Cellmark Diagnostics, and the first 2 years there, I worked as an evidence technician. I received the evidence into the laboratory, opened it up, and recorded what was received. In 2003, I was promoted to a DNA analyst, and there I performed the same duties I currently do here. In 2005, I moved cross country and moved to San Diego. Started working at another private DNA laboratory called Crime Scene Technologies, there as a DNA analyst as well. And then in 2008 is when I started at the Sheriff's Department.
What specific formal education did you receive in order to become a forensic analyst in the area of DNA for nearly the last 20 years?
I have a bachelor's degree in biology from Luther College, as well as a Master of Forensic Science degree from the George Washington University. Along with my degrees, specific coursework is required to do DNA analysis, and those classes that must be taken are genetics, molecular biology, and biochemistry. So I have taken those, as well as taking recommended courses on population statistics and genetics to help me do my data analysis and interpretation.
This is witness number 3. You're listening to this case moving along pretty quickly for day number 1 of the testimony in the case of the state of California versus Kellen Winslow II. We need to take a quick break right now here on Court TV Live. Don't go away. We're back with more after this. Welcome back to Court TV Live. Thank you so much for being with us on this Tuesday afternoon as we continue covering the case of the state of California versus Kellen Winslow II. We do want to warn you, the testimony that you are about to hear may contain very graphic details. I want to tell you this is witness number 3 on the stand. Her name's Kelly Hensley. She's a criminalist, and she processes DNA from evidence that's collected and brought into the sheriff's department. Right now she's talking about the differences between DNA found on something that you touch versus DNA found from a fluid. Let's listen in.
What those are?
The majority of the time we are looking for body fluids such as blood and semen. Saliva is another one, again, and we also have tests for urine and feces that we can conduct in the laboratory.
What sort of tests do you use in order to detect whether or not blood is present on an item?
The first thing we do is look for a red-brown stain. If we see a red-brown stain on an item, that's a visual indication that blood may be present. We also have a presumptive test, which is just a preliminary test that can guide me and indicate to me that a blood stain may be present, and that test is called Kastle-Meyer. And it's a color change test so that in the presence of blood, the reagent turns a bright pink color. So if I see a change to that bright pink with the visual red-brown staining, that will indicate to me that that sample is blood.
You mentioned that at least the initial step of the process to detect whether or not blood is present is a visual inspection of the item. Is that right?
Correct.
When you're conducting your analysis of an item, in particular using the example of an item of clothing, do you have a certain methodology that you personally use when you see whether or not there are reddish-brown stains along the item?
Usually we'll document them either in a drawing of notes or photography, circle the stains so that I know where they are and they'll be able to find them again if I need to find them again.
When you use the presumptive test, the Kastle-Meyer that you just described, is that basically a chemical process that once you detect the presence of blood, then that alerts you that there may be potentially biological material there?
Yes.
You keep using the term red-brown stain. Why do you use both of those colors when you're describing the stains?
When we, typically in the laboratory when I see a blood stain, it's been placed there, it's dried, and it's turned a red-brown color. It's not bright red like an apple, it's not brown, it's kind of like a dried blood stain, a reddish-brown color, and that's typically what we look for.
Is it fair to say that DNA analysis still has its limitations, even though it may be much more advanced even within the last 5 years than it had been 5 years before?
Yeah.
Would one of those limitations be that you could only detect the presence of DNA on an item at the time that you actually conduct that analysis on the item?
Objection on the meeting.
She's an expert on it.
Overruled, it's foundational. You can answer the question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Would one of those limitations be that you can only detect DNA that is present at the time that you actually conduct the analysis of the item you're testing?
I'm not sure I understand.
It's only there when you test it, right?
The portion that I test for DNA analysis is only available for testing as I'm testing it. Yes, there may be more to go back to at a later date, but the specific portion I test is only available at the time I'm testing it.
Okay. So then let me ask you about some of the forensic analysis that you did into the crime investigation with the San Diego Sheriff's Department Sexual Assault Unit. Were you assigned to assist with the analysis that had been submitted by Detective Michael Benavides in case ending 149?
Yes,
When was it that you were provided specific items of evidence to analyze in that case?
June 13th, 2018.
Based upon your review of the request that was made and the items that had been collected, were those items in fact received and recovered by the Sheriff's Department the day before on June 12th, 2018?
I do not know when they were collected.
Now, on June 13th, how is it that you receive an assignment, and then what steps do you take in order to complete that?
My supervisor approached me with an analysis request and asked if I could do it in an expedited fashion. He said the evidence items would be coming to the lab later that day and to be expecting a phone call when they arrived at the laboratory. The evidence did arrive. I met with Detective Benavides as he was bringing the evidence to our property and evidence unit. We briefly discussed the case. And then that same day, I pulled the items from our property and evidence unit and took them into the laboratory.
Now, prior to your analysis of the items that Detective Benavides had submitted for analysis, did you, in fact, have information and review the analysis that had been conducted by a fellow criminalist within the Sheriff's Crime Lab regarding a reference sample from a person identified as Kellen Winslow in case ending 974?
Yes,
And when you reviewed that information, was that in fact analysis that was personally done by criminalist Michael Palermo?
yes,
When you reviewed what he had done, did he in fact develop a DNA profile that was unique to that reference sample for Kellen Winslow?
yes.
Since the time that you did your initial comparison, have you had an opportunity to do a complete technical review of criminalist Palermo's analysis and ultimately his conclusions?
Yes, I have.
And did you in fact do that in preparation for your testimony in this case?
Yes.
Now, when you went through that technical review process for the development of the DNA profile for Mr. Winslow's reference sample, did you know any abnormalities?
No.
Did his conclusions and the specific DNA profile that was obtained, would that have been the same had you personally conducted that analysis based upon your review of his notes and the raw data associated with it?
Yes.
Now, can you just tell the jury what a DNA profile is and why it is that that's unique to an individual?
So you get half of your DNA from your mom and half of your DNA from your dad. So we look at multiple locations along the DNA strand. Currently, we're looking at 27. And at each one of those locations, again, there are a maximum of 2 DNA types, one from your mother and one from your father. And because the way the DNA is inherited, you get different DNA types at each of the locations. Siblings will share more than non-siblings, obviously, because they're getting the DNA types from their parents, but they're getting them differently along the 27 different locations we're looking at. So related people share more of their DNA profile, but that's how it inherited makes an individual unique DNA profile.
You mentioned that current technology looks at 27 different locations, is that right?
Yes.
And there would be, is it fair to say that there's like a numerical value assigned to each one of those locations? Or pardon?
There's a name for each one of those locations.
Okay. And in terms of somebody's personal DNA profile, would they have a number that is assigned for that individual that is, reflects the various locations that are there?
At each of the locations, there's a numerical value for the DNA type that occurs at each of the locations.
That's a much better way to say it. So then let me ask you, in terms of the 27 locations that are looked at now, how does that differ, for example, from the number of locations that were looked at even 10 years ago?
It's many more.
Do you recall how many, or over the course of your 20 years of conducting analysis, how many locations did you look at when you first came out of school and started working in this type of case?
I believe when I first started, there were 15 locations and 2 of them are overlapping. So total of 13.
Does that in fact reflect a greater sensitivity and a greater credence in the unique items or the individualization of the DNA profile? Now,
Yeah, the more loci that we look at gives us more ability to identify specific individuals because we're looking at more locations along the DNA strand.
so in terms of the reference sample that was obtained for Mr. Winslow, there were unique identifiers on the various 27 locations, right?
Correct.
Now, can you tell the jury what you do when you take an item that has unknown DNA on it and you compare it to a reference sample that would be characterized as a known?
When I have an evidence DNA profile, the first thing I do is look at the profile, try and interpret it, figure out how many contributors I think there are to this DNA profile, and then I use a software program to help me interpret and compare the DNA profile from an unknown to a known individual or reference sample.
In terms of the analysis in this case, ending 149, did you in fact determine whether or not there was DNA present in the white leather pants that had been collected from a person we're identifying as Jane Doe 1, who, an item that you identified in your report as item 2.2 after it had been impounded in this case?
Yes.
Can you just explain how the numbering of the items works when you're doing your analysis versus the numbering of the items that are impounded by the investigating agents?
The item itself was item 2.2. In the laboratory, within the DNA lab, we have an internal LIMS system which records all of our notes and collects our data that we're inputting and identifying the samples and helps us process the DNA through the whole procedure. The LIMS system that we have will assign it a unique number as well, so we have the item number as well as the LIMS number often associated with a single item of evidence.
Now, did you also assign an item number to a reference sample that was obtained from Jane Doe number 1 herself?
Yes.
Did you assign item 2.1?
Yes.
Did you also assign an item number to a pair of underwear that had been collected from Jane Doe 1 as item 2.3?
Yes.
Now, regarding your visual inspection that you always do when you're testing clothing in a sexual assault case, did you in fact photograph and document whether or not you detected any red-brown stains on the pants that had been collected from Jane Doe 1?
Yes, I did.
And did you detect any red-brown?
All right, you were listening to the testimony of a criminalist who analyzed evidence that was collected pertaining to the case of the alleged sexual assault with Jane Doe number 1. What we want to do right now is take a quick break. We'll bring you back here live into the courtroom right after this. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. Thank you so much for being with us on this Tuesday afternoon. We continue following the case of the state of California versus Kellen Winslow II. He is the former NFL star being accused by 5 different women of sexual misconduct. Today, we expect to hear the testimony from a woman identified as Jane Doe number 1. So here's what we know about the first accuser. She is 54 years old. She's a hitchhiker who alleges kidnapping, forcible rape, and oral copulation during a ride with Winslow in March of 2018. We know that DNA was detected in her pants that matches the former NFL star. We haven't heard from her yet. We know that there have been 3 witnesses so far called by the state, 2 investigators and 1 criminalist who is on the stand now. She's talking about how she analyzes DNA evidence. Let's listen back in live.
And 3.02 is how I documented that it was the pant material and not the liner, which was 3.01. If you look at the next one, it says scene area removed, 3.02.01, and then the line goes down to a vertical rectangle, and that's where I removed portion of the seam of the pants to extract for DNA analysis and to do testing as item 3.0201. And then there are 4 squares that kind of go around that vertical rectangular, and this is 4 areas cut and extracted together. So those are 4 other smaller cuttings I took of the crotch area, the pant material, put in one tube and extracted for DNA as 3.02.02.
Ms. Hensley, why was it that you focused your analysis on that particular area, and why did you actually retrieve and test 4 separate pants cuttings from that interior crotch portion of the pants?
A portion of my analysis prior to this involved looking at the pants with an alternate light source. In an alternate light source, we make the room completely as dark as we can and use a light with special goggles to look at an item to see if anything glows. So if something glows, that's indicating to me that a body fluid may be present. So I'd already done that on these. And there was fluorescence or glowing in this crotch area. So I knew that's where I needed to focus. And when we have a large area that glows, I can't take the whole thing. It won't fit into my tubes for my analysis, and it doesn't make sense to do it that way. So I take a representative cutting of the area where I think the DNA from a body fluid may be, and I combine that into one tube and extract them together. And that's what I did with the 4 that are around the vertical rectangle.
So the fluorescing that indicates the presence of biological material with the alternate light source, did that in fact direct you to then retrieve those cuttings from that specific area?
That is part of my analysis, yes.
Now, once you retrieve those items and, as you said, basically put it in a test tube, what processes did you use in order to try to determine whether or not DNA was present?
The first thing I do is look for sperm. That's the confirmation in the way that we can confirm that semen is present. So I did that first, and then after that I moved on to the DNA process to try and develop the DNA profile and actually extract the DNA out of the sample.
How do you look to see whether or not sperm is present?
I collect the sample as I did here with these 2 samples. Kind of do a small mini extraction where we add some chemicals to our sample and then put it on a microscope slide and try and look under a microscope to see if I visualize any sperm cells.
When you did a microscopic examination of item 3.02.02, the 4 pants cuttings, the representative sample, did you visually note the presence of sperm cells?
May I refer to my case manager?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. For item 3.02.02,
Yes.
I did not observe any sperm initially. I then took those samples forward to the DNA analysis process, in which case, at a later date, I did observe sperm cells on that sample.
Now, when you say that you conducted further analysis in the determination of whether or not DNA is present, what physically does that mean? What is it that you're doing after the microscopic examination?
That's when I began the DNA process. So the first step in the DNA process is to extract the DNA out of the item. So in this example, it would be the cuttings from the pants. I'm trying to remove any of the DNA that's on the item into a solution in a liquid form. Once I have it extracted in its form, then purified form, then I do a quantitation step to see how much DNA I have. Once I know how much I have, the next step in the DNA process is called amplification, and that's where I use a technique, a machine does it for me, to make millions of copies of the DNA that I have. So I have a little bit to begin with, and I need a lot more to actually develop the DNA profile. And then after the amplification process becomes the development of the DNA profile, it gives me a visual representation of all of those locations that we had talked about earlier, along with each of the representative numbers that belongs to each one of those locations. So the first step is to extract the DNA out of the sample, and that's what I did next after I looked for sperm.
So then, once you had done that and then engaged in the amplification process, did you have a sufficient quantity of DNA to then compare to a reference sample that had been provided by Mr. Winslow?
Yes, I did.
And when you began that process, or at what step in that process did you attempt to isolate any sperm fraction from the balance of the DNA that had been collected from the 4 pants cuttings?
During the extraction step. There's 2 different types of extraction procedures I can do. One is for samples that most likely do not contain sperm, and when we have a sample that will contain sperm or is suspected to contain sperm, we do a different type of DNA extraction called a differential procedure.
Did you suspect that this sample that you had collected contained sperm at that point?
I did not identify sperm initially. It was ALS positive, so there was still an opportunity that sperm was present, so I took it forward to differential extraction.
And the ALS positive means that it fluoresced with the alternative light source, correct?
Correct.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing you Court's Exhibit 13 for identification. Is that a diagram that you're familiar with?
Yes.
Does that in fact show the differential extraction process that you were just referring to?
Yes, it does.
Now, showing you Court's Exhibit 13, can you explain to the jury using this diagram what happens during the differential extraction process and how you're able to isolate a sperm fraction from a sample of DNA?
So the first portion of this exhibit shows like a combination of sperm and non-sperm cells. This is normal, it happens. Semen contains non-sperm cells and sperm cells, but there's also non-sperm cells from just contact and things that we touch. So we remove a portion of that, which is what I did with the pants, with removing the 4 cuttings and putting those in a tube, which is the next step. I add chemicals and heat to that, and it breaks open the cells and releases the DNA, the non-sperm cells into the DNA. So the non-sperm and the sperm cells have a different type of cell wall. So by initially adding heat and chemicals, the skin cells or epithelial cells, the non-sperm cells, break open much more easily. The sperm cells are very resilient. They have a very hard cell wall. It's hard to break open. So the regular extraction way will not break open sperm cells. So initially I break open the non-sperm cells. I remove then the non-sperm fraction of the DNA that has been released from the cell and put it in its own tube, non-sperm fraction. I then add more chemicals that are designed to break open the sperm cells. So then once that happens, the sperm cells are the remaining portion, and the DNA that comes from that makes it the sperm fraction.
Once you've gone through the differential extraction process for an item of evidence, do you then further note the separation between the two, one as being NS or non-sperm fraction and the other as being S or sperm fraction?
Yes.
And does that still correspond to the same lab ID number that you've been discussing?
Yes.
Now, when you engage in the differential extraction process for the 4 pant cuttings from the interior crotch portion of the white pants collected from Jane Doe 1, did you in fact isolate the sperm fraction that contained a single source contributor of DNA?
Yes, I did.
Can you explain to the jury what a single source contributor means and why that's different from a DNA mixture, for example?
The single source DNA profile is from one person. One person contributed the DNA on the item. We often have mixtures of DNA that may have come from 2 people, 3, 4 people. It's just a mixture of the DNA profiles of multiple people.
What you're watching is the live testimony of a scientist called by the state. This scientist analyzed some clothing evidence that was turned over to investigators with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department when Jane Doe number 1 made the complaint of being sexually assaulted by an unknown person. We need to take a quick break here on Court TV Live. We'll have much more coverage from you on the state of California versus Kellen Winslow II right after this. Welcome back to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. I'm Julie Grant. Thank you so much for being with us on this Tuesday afternoon. And on the West Coast, we are following a trial that is in the early stages, the case of the state of California versus Kellen Winslow II. So far, 3 witnesses have been called by the state. They've called a deputy, they've called a detective, and they've called a scientist, all talking about DNA evidence being the main focus, seeming to set up the testimony of Jane Doe number one of Winslow's accusers. Right now, the court is in a 15-minute recess. What I want to do is welcome back criminal defense attorney Michael Bixon. Michael, thank you so much for being here and staying with us during the coverage. Okay, so I want to get your thoughts. It seemed to me like what they were doing is kind of laying the groundwork for what we know is coming. We know that there was DNA matching Kellen Winslow's found in the pants of Jane Doe number one. She has yet to take the stand. They started with a deputy, a detective, and now a scientist. Talk to me about what this setup means and then what we expect to hear, please.
So we've heard a lot of very almost dry, science-laden testimony. And oftentimes, I think it's hard for a juror to sit through that because it is so dry and very technical. But it's very important to set up that foundation for the testimony that's to come. One of the things that the state is going to have to focus on, of course, is identification.
Yes.
We know that's an issue with Jane Doe number one in particular.
Yes, it is.
We know that earlier at the prelim, she actually identified attorney Brian Watkins as rapist. And so I think the state is going to focus on that identification issue and hit very hard on it. So part of that is going to be all the testimony that we've heard from the deputy, from the scientist, all talking about that DNA evidence to sort of back up their argument.
Right, because if it weren't for the DNA, perhaps this claim may not have gotten to the place that it has. We know at the preliminary hearing level, that's where the misidentification occurred that you just mentioned, and I'm glad you did. There was an instance where she pointed to Brian Watkins, who was sitting next to Kellen Winslow II. So no in-court identification as of yet, but the DNA match in her pants to Kellen Winslow II is a biggie. Huge hurdle for the defense. But yesterday in the opening statements, Brian Watkins seemed to acknowledge that there were numerous instances of, he called it unattached sex. He said he wouldn't even dignify it as affairs, seeming to go down the road, alluding to a consent defense, especially pertaining to Jane Doe number 1, 2, and perhaps Jane Doe number 4, who came forward later. Your thoughts on whether we will see a consent defense presented?
I absolutely do. I think that consent is going to be the biggest issue here at trial. For the defense to really bring out that theory, they're going to have to be attacking each and every witness as hard as they can and bringing up these alternative reasons as to why they might go forward to police and why they might brought forward this case. The money, the spotlight, anything that they can bring forward to sort of enhance their argument, they will. I don't think that the identification is going to be as much of an issue. Maybe with Jane Doe number 1, because of that earlier misidentification, that might somehow play into whether or not she misidentified him as a rapist versus whether or not it was an actual consensual encounter. I think it's going to be difficult, but I do think they're going to try to go that route.
Right. And when we heard the testimony from the second witness called, Detective Michael Benavides, he said that when she reported the complaint to their department, he was the one who handled it, that she said this was a rape by an unknown person. She did not know this individual. She was hitchhiking, got into his car in Encinitas, and the sexual assault investigation was then launched thereafter. Turned over some clothing items. Her pants were turned over. But we heard in opening statements from the defense yesterday that there was DNA from multiple people found in that pair of pants. So that's a very favorable fact for the defense, I would think. Your thoughts, please?
I absolutely agree. Which direction the defense is going to take that argument, I don't know yet. I think there's a lot left on the table right now with Jane Doe number 1 not having taken the stand yet. I think that the prosecution is going to have a very tough time getting around some of these bad facts they have. You know, the DNA from multiple people being found on her, that misidentification issue. I think what actually sort of helps the prosecution is the fact that she wasn't aware of who he was at the time that it happened. Obviously, the defense is going to be trying to claim that, you know, this is about the money issue and, you know, he's in the spotlight and so she's attacking him. But if she has no idea who he is, I think that actually helps the prosecution and hurts the defense.
Right, right. Good point. And we saw defense attorney Brian Watkins, who's the lead defense attorney on this case, say something similar in the opening statements yesterday. He was saying that after there was media coverage, after Kellen Winslow II was arrested and then charged with the incidents pertaining to Jane Doe number 1, 2, and 3. Then his words, he said, sure enough, here comes Jane Doe number 4, claiming that there was a rape that occurred back in 2003. And Michael, I'd like you to stay with us, if you will, please. Want to take you out live to San Diego right now, where Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter is standing by live outside of the courthouse. Chanley, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Hey, Julie, I can hear you.
Hi, good afternoon to you. Okay, Chanley, let's talk about what was going on in the courtroom that we couldn't see. Tell us what the jurors were doing as the first 3 witnesses were presented by the state, please.
Well, the morning started off with one juror being replaced. Alternate number 1 took the place of juror number 8. We saw that early this morning. So the jury is now sitting in order. They are paying attention. They have their notepads out, taking notes because they're hearing from a lot of scientific information. They're seeing pictures on the PowerPoint, and they're definitely taking notes. Some are nodding their heads. And interestingly, on a couple of the cross-examinations that have been pretty brief by Brian Watkins, a couple of the jurors will look at him kind of, he makes a couple of strong points, and they'll look at him just like, I am like, kind of like that, Julie. But they're definitely paying attention. A lot going on today.
Right. Chanley, who's in the gallery? Who might be here in particular from Kellen Winslow's family?
So there are 2 rows that are reserved for family right behind the defendant's table, and today, unlike yesterday, they're full. Both of the rows are full of family, friends. We have Kellen Winslow Sr., his mom, Katrina is there, as well as a cousin, and then the second row is full of family friends. It looks like friends of his father's, the senior's father, as well as a wife of one of those friends. So definitely more support today than we saw yesterday. But again, his wife is not in the gallery.
Not in the gallery. Well, we know his attorney made the point that they are married when he walked over, put his hands on his shoulders yesterday, delivering his opening statements to the jury, and made the point to say that he's been married to someone he knew since he was 13 years old. But one thing we found interesting was we saw that he wasn't wearing a wedding ring. And so we inquired about that. Have you heard any reason as to why he may not have on his wedding band?
Right, and again, I checked today. He's not wearing his ring again today. We heard from the Sheriff's Department that when they are booked and processed into the Sheriff's Department, all their items are seized and put in storage, and that includes jewelry. So maybe his wedding ring is in storage since he is incarcerated at this time.
Right. We suspected that that was something I believe I mentioned when I was talking with you yesterday. Okay, so it was handed over when he was booked because he is housed in the jail right now. I know we see him in the suit today in the courtroom, but he is being housed right now. His bond was taken away. So, okay, let's talk about this morning. It seemed to be that there was a setup, all this DNA evidence, the collection of the sample from him first, and then the pants that were turned over by the first accuser, Jane Doe number 1. It seemed that the prosecution is laying the groundwork for the testimony of Jane Doe number 1. What can we expect to hear from her, please, Chanley?
Yes. You're right, the morning's been all about the DNA, and that's one of the strongest pieces of evidence in the prosecutor's case, and so that's what he's starting his whole morning with. It's almost like he's preempting any possible identity issues that Jane Doe number 1 might have when she gets on the stand. We can't expect to hear from her after they've laid the background and all this foundation for her testimony. We can expect that we'll hear from her at some point today, Julie.
And Chanley, we were in a commercial break. Had the cross-exam begun yet of the third witness, the scientist?
Not yet. Actually, she's still on direct examination. The criminalist is. She just completed, I guess, testifying about one of the pieces from the liner of the white pants Jane Doe number 1 was wearing tested positive for the sperm fraction connecting to Kellen Winslow II. She was about to talk about the other 3 pieces that she cut from the liner of the pants when the judge said, hey, it's a great time to take a little bit of a break. We'll come back to that in about 15 minutes, Julie.
Okay. Chanley, I want to ask you about these 5 accusers. Is it true that none of them knew about any of the other ones when they came forward to the state?
That's what Dan Owens said yesterday in his opening statement, that the 5 accusers have no connection. They don't know each other. They came forward not knowing that other women were also accusing Kellen Winslow II. We do know, however, that Jane Doe number 4 did see that Kellen Winslow was arrested at the time that she came forward because Her alleged incident took place about 15 years ago. So when she saw that he was in the news, she said, this is what happened to me. She wanted to come forward. And the defense does say in their opening statement yesterday that number 5 is a total result of the news, that the only reason she did come forward was because she knew he was from the news and was this perpetrator of sexual offenses. But I think when she gets on the stand, that she will actually contradict that.
Right. And Chinley, I want to ask you about the identification issue as it pertains to Jane Doe number 1. We were talking a little bit about it here in the studio. And remind us again, please, what happened at that first preliminary hearing? There were 2 in this case. If you would explain, walk us through prelim 1, prelim 2, and at prelim 1, what happened with Jane Doe number 1 when she was asked to identify Kellen Winslow?
So back in July of last year, the first preliminary took place where Jane Doe number 1 through 3 offered testimony at the preliminary hearing. When Jane Doe number 1 was on the stand explaining what happened to her back in March of 2018, the prosecutor asked her to identify the man who raped her in the courtroom. At that time, it took her about a minute, several seconds, to look up and look around the room. Eventually, she pointed to the defendant's table to Brian Watkins, who was in a suit like Kellen Winslow, wearing glasses like Kellen Winslow. And the prosecutor is aware that there's this identity issue. Not only did she misidentify him in court, she couldn't even pick Kellen Winslow out of the 6-pack lineup when she reported the incident to the police. And so I think that's why it's really important that this prosecutor is beginning the day with the DNA match so that he's preempting this identity issue that we may see later today when he asks her to identify the defendant in court today.
Chinley, thank you. And what we want to do right now is play that clip from the courtroom. Let's take a look.
In the middle with the pink shirt on.
So you heard her say in the middle with the pink shirt on, and at the time Brian Watkins was wearing the pink shirt. He was kind of seated back in his chair, kind of slumped back with his shoulders forward, and Kellen Winslow was sitting straight up, looking very confident, and she misidentified him. So certainly a big issue, something remains to be seen, but I understand that there's also an ID issue with Jane Doe number 3. Is that right, Chinley?
That's right. Jane Doe number 3 has never been able to identify Kellen Winslow II. She could not pick him out of the 6-pack lineup when she reported the incident late May of 2018. She also could not, during that same preliminary hearing back in July 2018, identify him in court. In fact, she describes a man much shorter and of a different build and type than Kellen Winslow. We can expect that his defense will bring that part up to the forefront.
Most definitely. All right, Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter reporting for us. Chanley, thank you so much. We'll let you get back into the courtroom. We know court is on a brief recess. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll take you back into the courtroom live as soon as things pick back up. Welcome back to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. I'm Julie Grant. Thank you so much for being with us on this Tuesday afternoon. We continue with our gavel-to-gavel coverage of the state of California versus Kellen Winslow II, former NFL star being accused by the prosecution of being a sexual predator. He says he is innocent. As you can see, court is in recess right now. They're in a 15-minute recess. What we want to do is take you out live outside of the San Diego County Courthouse, where we have a guest we want to welcome in. Criminal defense attorney Jan Ronas is joining us. Also welcome back our guest Michael Bixon, who is here in our Court TV headquarters studio. Thank you both so much for being here. Jan, first question to you. I'm curious, have you practiced with any of the attorneys that are on this case?
Well, as a matter of fact, I know Mark Carlos and the other counsel very well. I've known him for years. They're both real fine attorneys, and certainly Mr. Winslow is in good hands.
What do you expect as far as advocacy style that we may see? Oh, I am so sorry, Jan, before you answer that question, we understand the judge is back on the bench. The jury's being brought back in. We have to go back into the courtroom live. Jan, thank you. Michael, thank you. Let's listen back in as court is resuming. Again, the state of California versus Kellen Winslow II.
Okay, you were referring to Court Exhibit 17, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that's what you base your answer no upon, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
that is a picture, or my drawing of the underwear.
Okay, all right, next question.
Thank you. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the other items of evidence that we tested. We had to focus on the 4 pants cuttings from the inside the interior liner of the pants, correct?
Yes.
Now, did you also conduct the same form of differential extraction process for other locations within the same pair of pants?
Yes.
Did you specifically locate in the non-sperm fraction of the 4 pants cuttings that contained the sperm fraction of Mr. Winslow's DNA? Did you detect the presence of DNA first?
Yes.
Did you compare that to the DNA reference sample that had been provided by Jane Doe 1?
Yes.
And what conclusions did you make?
That was a mixture of DNA from at least 3 people, so I assumed 3 people as my number of contributors in that DNA profile. I briefly spoke about the computer program that helps me do my comparisons. That computer program, part of what it does is takes a mixture of DNA and breaks it into the components of the contributors. I tell it there are 3 people, it takes the profile and breaks it into 3 approximate percentages for each contributor. So the estimated mixture ratio that was assigned for the 3 contributors is a 79% contributor, a 13% contributor, and an 8% contributor. And then I compare the reference samples from Jane Doe 1 and Kellen Winslow to the mixture. So the statistic is the same statistic I performed earlier, the likelihood ratio comparing the 2 scenarios. So the comparison is that the mixture of DNA, oh, sorry, wrong one. No, that's right. Yeah, right? 2.2.02.02 NS, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That would be the non-sperm fraction of the same pants cuttings that we were referring to that contain the sperm fraction attributed to Mr. Winslow.
Yes, okay. So the mixture of DNA obtained from item 2.2.02.02 NS is 1.4 times 10 to the 28 times more likely if it originated from Jane Doe 1 and 2 unknown contributors than if it originated from 3 unknown contributors. And then...
Now let me ask, in terms of what that means, is that very strong support for inclusion of Jane Doe 1's DNA?
Yes, it is.
And when you're doing this type of differential extraction process, that would be the separate tube, essentially, that we were looking at in the diagram on Courts Exhibit 13, right?
Yes.
Now, did you also conduct analysis on other portions of the pants that resulted in certain conclusions and numerical values associated with the presence of DNA?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that you conducted extensive DNA analysis in not only this case ending 149, but then also other cases that were investigated and referred to the Sheriff's Crime Lab for analysis?
Yes.
Specifically, did you in fact test a SART kit that had been attributed to a person who we're referring to as Jane Doe 2?
I did not test it. It was tested by Mike Palermo, who we spoke about earlier.
Did you do the technical review of that analysis?
Yes, I did.
And did you ultimately then do comparisons at a later date and concluding his conclusions?
Yes.
So then let me just give a timeout for you right now, because we are going to bring you back at a later date to testify to some of the further analyses that you conducted. And would that also include forensic processing of vehicles that were associated with the case?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further at this time as it relates to this topic.
All right, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Hensley, you talked about the transferring of DNA. You would expect to see a transfer of DNA when people have consensual sex, right?
Objection, argumentative as to the term consensual.
Overruled, you can answer.
I don't really have an expectation, but there is a possibility that DNA could transfer, yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, any redirect based on that one question?
No.
All right, I imagine this witness is subject to recall, is that correct?
She is.
Okay, all right, but she's done for the day?
She is.
All right, Ms. Hensel, you are done for the day, but you are still subject to recall. So thank you for your testimony. I think we'll hear back from you another day. All right, have a nice day.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. I'll give you a moment to pack up all your stuff. Just make sure you don't grab any marked court exhibits. And I'll take those.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, you can call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people now call Jane Doe 1.
All right, and we will bring her in through the back door, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right.
Prosecution just called Jane Doe number 1 to the stand. She is 54 years old, said to have been hitchhiking on the day of the alleged incident.
Before you sit down, I'll ask you to face
Hear the judge
clerk
now. Let's
and
listen
raise
in.
your right hand if you would, please.
As she takes the oath.
You do solemnly state that the testimony you are about to give in the matter now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. You may have a seat. And I'd like to ask Deputy DA Owens to confirm the witness sitting at the witness stand is indeed Jane Doe number 1. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning, ma'am.
Hi.
All right, we are going to be referring to, as you are well aware, as Jane Doe number 1. We're doing that to protect your anonymity. I don't want you to refer to yourself by your true name, okay? You understand?
Yes.
Okay, and we need yeses and nos for purposes of the
All
record.
right.
Okay, because if you say mm-hmm or mm-mm, that doesn't translate on the transcript to a yes or no. All right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so if you say that, if you do mention that, I will ask for clarification. We just have to make sure that the record is clear. So if somebody needs to read a transcript about this proceeding at a later date, they are able to do so. Okay? No?
Yes.
It's got to be yes or no, okay?
Yes.
Are you a little bit nervous?
Yes.
All right. Would you like some water or anything?
Yes.
All right, I think there's some water there, and
Your Honor, I had some.
we'll bring you a glass of water right now. And if you ever need to take a break during the course of the testimony, you just let us know. All right, so
Yes.
Mr. Owen, whenever you're ready, you can begin your direct examination.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Thank you and good morning.
Morning.
So I have to refer to you as Ms. Doe or Jane Doe, okay?
Yes.
Now, the court just asked you, are you a little bit nervous being here today?
Yes.
I want you to know that any of the cameras that are in the courtroom are not allowed to film you. You understand that, right?
Yes.
I hope that helps with the nerves a little bit, but we need to ask you about some things that came to light last year that you've been talked to extensively about. And I'm going to ask you as best you can to listen to the questions that are being asked and to answer them to the best of your ability, okay?
Yes.
First, let me ask you, how old are you?
55.
Do you live in the North County area of San Diego?
Yes.
How long have you lived in North County, San Diego?
55 years.
Your whole life?
Yes.
What do you do for a living? You don't have to tell us where you work, but just generally, what do you do?
I work parking. I'm a parking director.
Do you live in the Encinitas area?
Yes.
Specifically in March of 2018, were you living in the Encinitas area?
Yes.
Now, on March 17th, 2018, do you recall a time when you were walking on Santa Fe Drive in the city of Encinitas?
Yes.
And that's what I'm going to ask you about, is for you to tell us, as best you recall, what happened while you were walking on Santa Fe Drive and in the time period after that, okay?
Yes.
What were you doing when you were walking on Santa Fe Drive?
I was walking up the hill, and I didn't want to walk all the way to 101 because that's where I was going. So I was walking up the hill, Santa Fe and El Camino. So you go up the hill, and I didn't want to walk, so I turned around and I put my thumb out to hitchhike.
Can you describe that general area of Santa Fe and El Camino Real? You're referring to it as a hill. Describe it as best you can.
Well, El Camino's on the bottom, and then you're like, if you can't, you come this way, you go up the hill, Santa Fe Drive. It's in Encinitas, and then you go up and over, and there's Crest, and then there's Lake Drive.
So, Ms. Doe, is Crest Drive actually at the top of the hill? It's on the crest of the hill?
Yes, it is.
And then the next street down from Crest Drive, as you're traveling westbound, would be Lake Drive, is that right?
Right.
As you were walking down Santa Fe and passing Lake Drive, is that about the time when you decided to attempt to catch a ride or hitchhike?
Right, I turned around and I said, to myself, I didn't want to walk, so I put my thumb out.
What were you planning on doing that day as you were walking through Encinitas towards the 101, as you said?
Just to go shopping.
Approximately what time on March 17th was this?
About 3:30 in the afternoon.
As you were walking along Santa Fe Drive, do you remember whether there were a lot of cars around?
Yes, there was a lot of traffic.
Do you recall whether or not people passed you as you began to thumb for a ride?
Yes, there's a few cars.
What happened as you were asking for a ride from some of the cars that were passing by?
Well, this Jeep pulled over,
Can you
and
describe the Jeep?
it was just a black Jeep, a really nice, looked brand new Jeep.
Do you recall whether or not it was the type that it was like a convertible Jeep with a cloth top, or was it a hard top?
It was a hard top.
Was it larger or smaller?
It was larger.
Do you recall any other markings on it or anything else specific about it, other than its color?
No.
What happened as that large black Jeep, as you described, pulled over?
He pulled over and I asked him if he'd give me a ride to Vulcan, to 101.
Were you talking to the person through the passenger window?
Well, he rolled down to the right, the passenger window.
And when you were talking to him, were you the first person to talk, or was he?
I think I said, will you give me a ride? And he goes, yeah, sure, I'll give you a ride.
Now, can you describe the person who was inside the black SUV?
He was black.
When you say that he was black, did he have lighter skin or dark skin?
He had lighter skin.
How would you describe the skin tone that he had?
He was like more fair than black, dark.
Do you recall whether or not he had hair, and if so,
He did have hair.
What type of hair?
His
did he
hair
have?
was like, it was like either it's been crimped a lot or it was just like an afro type. It was like, you know, the crimping iron, what it does to your hair? And it was like long, and then it was right here.
Okay, when she says right here, she's referring to about the length at the bottom of her ears. Next question.
And when you saw this person and pulled over, did you see whether or not anyone else was inside the black SUV?
No, I didn't see anybody else.
After you asked him if he would give you a ride, what did he say?
He said, sure, I'll give you a ride.
So what happened next?
So I jumped in the Jeep, and we started going down, so we started going, and then like we passed the lights on, I don't know, right where the school was. So we're coming down, and then all of a sudden he goes, I'm not gonna take you to Vulcan, I'm gonna take you to the store and I went, no.
Ms. Doe,
So,
Ms. Doe, let me stop you there.
okay,
Is it difficult to talk about this?
yes, a little bit. It's just a reminder.
Now, when you first got into the car,
Mhm.
do you recall talking with the person?
Oh, yes, we were talking, I did start a conversation of happy St. Patty's Day. It was St. Patrick's Day.
Did the man who was driving, did he seem to be friendly with you at that time?
Yes, he introduced himself as Dominique. I introduced myself.
You recall the name Dominique?
That's what he said.
And as you were driving, you mentioned that you went past a school. What school is on Santa Fe Drive?
The high school, San Diego High School.
As you passed San Diego High School, is that when he made the statement that he wasn't going to take you to Vulcan?
Yes, right when we were passing it, right before with the 7-Eleven, right when we were passing, going through the light right there, he changed his tune. He goes, I'm not taking you to Vulcan, or I'm not taking you to 101 or Vulcan, and I'm gonna and if you say anything, I will kill you. And I just froze then. And then we went under the underpass. And I go, just pull over right here, because the hospital's right there. I said, just pull over right here and let me out, and I won't say anything.
Just a moment. There was an objection. What's the objection?
No question pending. It's narrative.
Sustained. You can ask another question.
Thank you. So after he made the initial statement that he wasn't going to take you to Vulcan or Highway 101, you were describing what else he said to you, is that right?
Yes.
Now, did he make the statement that he was going to fuck you?
Yes.
Did he tell you where he was taking you?
Yes. He said, I'm going to do this in the grocery store parking lot.
Was there a point where he said what would happen if you told anyone what he was going to do?
He goes, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill you.
Was that while he was still driving westbound on Santa Fe Drive before you got to the freeway overpass?
He said, no, that was like probably, yeah, it was right going under it. He said that. He goes, I'm going to take you to the Vons, and then if you say anything, I'm going to kill you. So we're going under the underpass.
So, Ms. Doe, what did you say to him after he had threatened you in that way?
I said, just pull over right here, because another light comes up, and the hospital's on the left-hand or right-hand side. And I go, just pull over right next to the hospital, because the next light comes right after that. And I'll get out, you don't have to go anywhere. I tried to, make it, change the subject of what was going on.
How did he respond when you told him?
He's like, no way, I'll kill you.
When you told him to pull over and let you out at the hospital, did he say that he would kill you?
Yes, he said that he was going to get this done. And
What specifically do you recall him saying about getting this done? Do you remember his exact words?
Me no matter what, and that was it.
What did you do in response?
I just begged him, please just pull over right here, just pull over right here. You don't have to drive me anywhere if that's what made you mad, And just pull over right here at the light, because the hospital is right there, and it's like, but he went the other way, because you either go to the hospital or you go to the Rite Aid, so that's where the Vons is.
And you're using your hands to gesture, the hospital being to the right, and then what you call a Rite Aid being to the left, is that right?
Well, when you're going this way, it's to the right, and then the store is that way, because you're going down the hill.
Which is to the right? You said when you
The
go.
hospital's to the right, and the Rite Aid's to the left.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did that person then make a left-hand turn into the shopping center?
Yes, he did.
Where did he go once he drove into the shopping center?
He went all the way in, and then there's the Rite Aid, and then he took a left, and then there's the Vons, and then there's 24-hour Fitness, and he drove around to the back of the stores right there.
When you say it's the back of the stores, would that be adjacent to a planted area that leads towards the freeway on-ramp? Is it next to the plant area with a
Yeah,
freeway
well, when you go to the Vons, you go, there's the Rite Aid, and then there's the Wall, and then there's the Vons, and then there's the 24-hour Fitness. I don't know what's next to it. I think there's a, and then, yeah, there's a fence, and that's where the ice plant is.
So I want to ask you about what happened after he drove you now to the rear of the shopping center. Once he pulled over there, first, do you recall whether anybody was around?
Yes, we had to stop for a lady that walked out from the store right there, and I was trying to like signal her like, hey, you know, I need some help here. This, you know.
Do you remember whether or not you actually called out to the woman?
I didn't try. I was just waving my hands. I didn't scream anything like help or nothing.
What were you thinking at that moment? And why you didn't scream?
I don't know. I just.
Based on what he had said to you.
I wanted somebody to come to save me. That's what I wanted, but it didn't happen.
Based on what he had said to you, what did you think was going to happen as he was driving you?
I wasn't sure. I just thought I was going to die, I guess.
Now, you remember seeing this woman once he had driven you to the area, to the rear side of the shopping center. Do you recall whether or not anyone else was around?
No, nobody came out.
Do you recall whether or not there were any cars that were parked there?
There was two.
And do you recall what type of cars they were or where they were
It's
parked?
like a white
in relation to you?
Nissan, and I think there was a black one or a blue little. They were just little compact cars.
Okay, let me just interrupt here. Make sure that Mr. Owens is finished asking the question before you give your answer, because the court reporter is taking on everything you say, and if you start answering the question while he's still asking the question, we'll have overlapping statements, and the court reporter can't take them down both at the same time. So please be patient, wait for Mr. Owens to finish his question, okay?
All right.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Owens, next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, you mentioned that you remember seeing two cars. Did you ever see any people that were walking around those cars or coming and going from that area at all?
No people.
Where did this man drive you after he pulled into that area near the two cars?
It was just a little parking lot in the back, the corner of where the 24 Hours Fitness. So there was 1, 2, 3 parking spaces, and he pulled in right there.
And did he actually park the car?
He parked it right next to the two cars. There was 3 parkings. There was 1 car, 2 cars, and then his truck, his Jeep.
What happened after he pulled into the parking space back there?
I begged him not to do this, to let this happen. I go, please just let me go. You know, I'll never say a word. I'm sorry that I asked you for a ride. You know, please just, I'm begging you not to do this. I won't tell anybody. Just please let me go.
What did he say back to you?
Kill you if you say. And if you ever tell anybody, I will kill you. And he just kept on, that was it.
Did he ever show you any weapons?
No, but he padded to his because he patted to his pant leg, his short leg, and there was like, it looked like something was in there.
Okay, for the record, the witness is patting the palm of her hand on her left thigh. Next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you ever specifically see if he had any weapons, though?
No.
Did you believe that he may have a weapon of some sort?
Yes.
What type of weapon did you think he had?
I thought he had a gun.
What did you think was going to happen if you didn't do what he was telling you to do?
That I was going to die or be bleeding all over the place right across the street from the hospital.
What happened after he continued to threaten you when you were begging for him to let you go?
I said, if I do this, will you let me go? And I think he said yes.
What happened next?
Then he goes, let's go outside and I will. So we got out of the car. So we both got out of the Jeep and we walked in back of the Jeep and we walked towards the fence. That's where the freeway is.
When you walked towards the fence, was that what you were describing as being the separator between the parking lot and the ice plant, I think you used?
Well, we walked in the back of the Jeep, and then the the fence is right there, but then there was a utility fence there, so he walked towards the utility fence, and there's a bunch of maintenance stuff right there, because there's a park right across the way.
Ms. Doe, as he was walking over towards the fence area, were you walking with him?
Yes, but not right next to him.
Were you following him where he had told you to go?
Yes.
When you were walking with him, why didn't you run away?
I was scared. I was really scared to death. I don't know. I really don't know why I didn't defend myself.
You
I sat there and let him do that to me.
Was he bigger than you?
Yes, very much so.
Can you describe his stature, like how tall he was?
He's probably about 6 foot.
Did he appear to be muscular?
He was bodybuilding.
What do you mean when you say bodybuilding?
Because he had a shirt, I think he had a tank top on, and he had muscles.
When you saw that, did that cause you any concern for your safety?
Well, he was bigger than I was. Yes, of course. When somebody threatens you, you have to react that it's not going to. He could.
So what happened as you walked towards the fence area with him?
We walked over to the fence, and we both jumped over the fence.
How high was the fence?
It's about not that high. About as high as that brown thing.
About the brown stripe?
Yeah,
there?
the third one, the third wood, dark wood.
The third one from the top?
Uh-huh.
Okay, indicating approximately 5 feet, 5 to 5.5 feet?
Thank you, Your Honor. And how tall are you?
5 feet.
Were you able to jump over that fence?
I crawled, yeah, it's a chain link fence, so it was. So we both jumped over the fence.
And what happened after you had both jumped over the fence?
He took his pants off, and then I started taking off my clothes. And he goes, "Oh no, let's just go back to the car, you know. Let's not do that." I don't know what he saw or if somebody came out or what happened, but he just all of a sudden he goes, "Put your clothes." He already had his pants off. I didn't have mine off yet. And he all of a sudden he just said, put your clothes back on and we're gonna go back to the car.
Ms. Doe, do you recall what he was wearing, what articles of clothing he had removed when you say that he had taken his pants off?
It was shorts. He had shorts and he had like a shirt, a yellow shirt on.
And
I don't know if it was a tank top, but he had muscles, that's all.
Okay, indicating the right bicep area, which we refer to as muscles.
thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
And when you are describing the shorts, were they tight or were they made of some other material?
I think they were drawstring, like the basketball shorts like type.
And you were describing a tank top of some sort. Was it yellow in color?
It was yellow.
Is that what he removed when you were outside in the ice plant?
He had this, wrestler's, like leotard on. It's a black that they, you know, it's like a shorts, like the ones that the wrestlers wear. They're leotards, but it goes all the way up. And they have two little strappies. It's like a whole bodysuit type thing. He had that on.
And you're taking both of your
Underneath.
hands and you're describing the area along the chest, but then over the shoulders. when you're
Right, a
describing
leotard
the
type
leotard.
thing, that, for your whole body, it goes, it's like a, you know, a nylons, like type thing that goes, but it goes all the way up and it has two
Is
strippers.
it form-fitting to the body?
Yes,
Was he wearing that, the wrestler's uniform as you described, or leotard, was he wearing that underneath the drawstring basketball shorts and the yellow tank top?
yes,
Do you recall what color that item of clothing was, the
Black.
leotard? Was it
black.
Now, did he actually remove that leotard when you were outside of the car, if you recall?
No, he didn't.
Then what happened after he changed his mind or made that statement, no, let's go back in the car?
So we went, okay, so we're over the fence, we walked back to the car, he opened the car door for me, and then I got back in, and he went to the driver's side, and he got in the car, and then I begged him again. I said, please let me go. I won't tell anybody, and
What did once he had gotten back into the car, were you seated in the front passenger seat?
yes, I was.
Was he seated in the driver's seat?
Yes, he was.
What did he say to you once you had gotten back into the car and you began to protest again?
Wait,
Do you remember him saying anything at that point?
I begged him for him to let me go again, and then he goes, no, fuck you, and I don't remember what he said after that.
What was the next thing he did?
He pulled down his leotard. He took off his shirt and he pulled down his leotard, and he pulled out his penis.
Do you recall whether or not when he exposed his penis, if he was erect or not?
He was erect.
What did he say as he removed his leotard and pulled out his penis?
He said suck this, but I want to describe his penis, dude. It's like this big. It's not like it's this big. It's like this big. I mean, it's like gigantic. I mean, I don't know how oh my gosh, I just can't even believe it. I mean.
So you're describing, you're gesturing with both of your hands separated.
I've never seen a penis that big.
Okay, wait till he's finished with the question. Can you make a record for what she was describing?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. You were taking both of your hands and you were holding them in front of your body, and they were with the index fingers and
Yeah,
the
it's
thumbs.
not-
Just a minute, wait till he's finished
Okay.
we have to describe for the record what you're doing. Go ahead, Mr. Owens.
You had taken both your hands and you were extending your index fingers towards each other and your thumbs towards each other in a circular motion, and the fingers were not connecting. Is that correct?
Right.
And are you describing just the size of the man's penis at that point?
Yes.
Was it large?
Very large.
What did you think in that moment when he had told you to suck on his penis and exposed himself?
How am I supposed to put my mouth on that when my mouth's not that, I couldn't open up that big.
What did you do?
So we're both sitting in the thing, and in the truck or in the Jeep, and I went over and I started sucking on it, and then like a minute or two went, and then I pulled back.
Okay, the witness is indicating that she leaned to her left. All right, next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you recall whether or not he said or did anything as you performed oral sex on him?
No, he didn't say, I don't remember, no, he didn't say anything.
Did he grab you in any way?
Not right then, no.
Why did you do what he told you to do?
Because he threatened to kill me. He was gonna kill me. He when he was out of the car, he touched his hand. I go, what are you gonna kill me with or something? And he touched his shorts.
Again, the witness is patting her left thigh with her left hand.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Next question.
What happened after you began to perform oral sex but then stopped?
Then he goes, I'm gonna come over to your side. So take down your pants. So.
What did you do?
So he came over to my side, to where I was sitting, and he took off his, well, he already had it off, but he jumped over to the passenger side, and he sat on top of me, and he stuck his penis in me.
Was he facing you?
Yes, he was facing me. He was sitting on top of me.
When you say that he's sitting on top of you, what part of his body was making contact with your body?
His penis. He was sitting on top of me, like with his legs. My legs were wide open, and he was like right in front here of me in the car.
Do you recall what clothing you were wearing that day?
I had white pants on.
What type of pants?
They were just white pants.
Did you take them off when he told you to?
Yes, I took them off.
Do you recall whether you were wearing underwear?
Yes, I did have underwear.
Did you take them off when he told you to?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember what type of top you were wearing?
I had a tank top on.
Did you remove that item of clothing or keep it on?
It was on.
When he got on top of you, did he feel heavy?
Yes.
Did he hold you down in any way?
Well, when he inserted his penis, it hurt so bad, I don't know how I could have even opened up. Because
So, Ms. Doe, let me ask you.
okay.
Let me ask you a question. Did it hurt when he penetrated you vaginally with his penis?
Yes, I kept on saying, ow, 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 because I don't know how he fit that thing in there.
And can you just describe as best you can what he did while he was having sex with you?
He was sitting on top of me, and then he like made me look this way. So when
You're moving to your left, and with your face, with your neck turned, and you took your left hand and you
so I was
pushed it.
sitting-
Just a moment, he's describing
Okay.
for the
You took your
record.
left hand and you put it alongside your right cheek, is that right?
Right.
Did he push upon you, or did he just push his body against you?
He had his body against me, but he had his hand like on my back. Like,
Now,
Well, you're indicating on the right side of your back, is that correct? Where he had his hand?
yeah, he had his hand like, let's see. Yeah, he had one of his hands on my back. That's all I remember.
Okay, now you're indicating on the left side. All right, next question.
and when you say that he had his hand on your back, was he basically mounting you in the front passenger seat of the vehicle? He was on top of you.
Right, he was on top of me.
Was he able to penetrate you vaginally though?
Yes, it felt like a bunch of water or something came out, so like he went in for like a few minutes. I don't even think it was even more than 5 minutes, not even that. And I just felt this heavy gush of water going.
What did you think it was?
Blood.
When you felt
It was
that?
blood.
Did you feel yourself bleeding?
Yes.
And I have to ask you, but at that point in time, were you menstruating?
No, I wasn't.
We're listening to the testimony of Jane Doe number one of Kellen Winslow II's 5 accusers. We understand this testimony is very graphic, but we want you to hear her story in her words. That's why we're sharing it this way with you. Let's listen back in.
Had you felt that gushing or that liquid before? Meaning before he had penetrated you?
No.
What did you do other than, as you said, say ow?
He just finally got, I don't remember saying anything. He just got the sex done, and then he just jumped off, and he got out of the car and went to the driver's side and got out. Or he told me to get out.
Can you describe his demeanor in that moment?
And he just, he was just mean.
Can you tell why he was mad at you?
Well, he got what he wanted. I don't know. No.
Objection.
Did he?
What's the objection?
Non-responsive.
Overruled, the answer will stand. You can cover it on cross. Next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. What happened after he got mad at you out of his car?
I just jumped out of the car. I just didn't want to think about it, I was bleeding. I felt this heavy gush coming out of me. I was just probably glad that he would, it was done, it was over.
Did you put your pants back on before getting out of the car?
Yes, I did. But I did tell him that I would turn him in afterwards. When I was leaving, I was like, I'm going to tell the police, because there's no way that you're going to get away with this one way or another. If it's today or tomorrow or next week, I am going to tell them. I did tell him that.
Did you say that as you were getting out of the car?
Yes.
Do you remember if he responded in any way?
He didn't say a word.
Where did he go after you got out of the car?
He went, I don't know, he went towards the freeway. When he came out of this grocery store, he he just left the same way we got there, the same exact way. I didn't see if he jumped on the freeway. I didn't chase him down. I just watched him leave, and I said pervert really loud when he left. I screamed it. I couldn't believe it. And
Did you see anyone else?
I had a cell phone, so I don't know why I didn't call. So
let me ask you about that in a moment. But first, did you see anyone else around in that when you first got out of the car?
in the parking lot or where?
In the parking lot.
Well, there's a grocery store. Of course, there was people coming in and out, but in the back there was nobody.
So then, where did you go after he drove off back onto Santa Fe?
I just walked myself down to where I wanted to go, to Vulcan. I went to the bathroom, and I went to the store and bought a douche and douched.
Did you actually clean yourself?
Yes.
Do you recall whether you saw blood?
Yeah, there was blood all over. Yes.
When you say all over, you're referring to yourself?
Yes.
Do you ever remember seeing any blood inside his car at all?
No, not on the seat or nothing. I think it got dirty though. I don't remember.
So then, after you went to and cleaned yourself in the restroom, what did you do that day?
I just walked around 101 and did what I wanted to do that day, and then I walked home. I went home. I took the bus home.
When you say that you had a cell phone, did you call 911 or report what had happened?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I don't know. I just didn't.
At some point after this happened, did you decide that you wanted to come forward and speak to law enforcement?
Yes. Like I said, I told him that I was going to turn him in no matter what after it happened. There was no way.
So what was it that changed in your mind that caused you to want to come forward?
Because people can't take advantage of people like that.
Did you in fact go to the Sheriff's Department on March 21st, 2018 and talk to a Sheriff's deputy?
Yes, I did.
How was it that you first contacted the Sheriff's Department?
I walked up there because I live right down the street.
Did you ever call as you arrived there?
Called, like, what, called before? No, I just walked up there because it's easier to do that.
Did you actually call 911 at some point on the day that you reported it?
No, I did not.
Once you got there, did you speak to a Sheriff's deputy?
Yes, I did.
Now, when you first came forward and talked about what had happened, did you tell that Sheriff's deputy that you didn't want this to
You're
happen
listening to the
again?
testimony of Jane Doe number 1, telling the court that Kellen Winslow II, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. She's testifying that someone raped her. She has not identified that person as him. But we know this testimony was very graphic, very upsetting, and tough to listen to. The reason why we're bringing it to you is because we want you to hear it in her words, what Jane Doe number 1 is saying happened to her on that day in March. We need to take a quick break. Much more right after this.
I really believe that.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. Very graphic testimony from Jane Doe number 1 saying she was raped by an unknown person. Let's listen back in.
Cross-examination?
Ms. Doe, you have been interviewed on a number of occasions for this case, correct?
Yes.
Right. How many times have you talked to law enforcement?
Twice, I think.
Just 2 times.
I think so.
Okay, so just so we're clear, you've only spoken to a police officer or a detective on 2 separate occasions.
Maybe 3.
If you don't recall, you don't recall.
I don't, okay, so just say 2 then.
Just 2. Okay. And this gentleman over here, Mr. Owens, have you spoken to him about the case?
No.
Never spoke to him?
About the case?
Yeah, about your testimony.
Lately or
Ever?
ever? Yes.
How many times have you spoken to Mr. Owens?
Once, I think.
Just 1 time. Okay, and that's about your testimony, right?
Right.
Is that before the preliminary hearing or after the preliminary hearing? Let me make this easy for you. You came to court, you testified before the lawyers and the judge, right? Remember that?
Yes.
Okay, and you remember you pointed out this man
Right.
being the individual who raped you. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay, this man I'm standing in front of.
Yes.
For the record, this is Mr. Watkins.
The record will
Oh, I
so
know.
reflect.
And that's still the person who raped you?
No, it's the one next to you.
Yeah.
Him.
In the prelim, you were pretty sure about
Okay,
it, right?
just a moment for the record. The person next to Mr. Watkins is the defendant. Next question.
But at the prelim, you were pretty sure it was Mr. Watkins. Remember that?
Yes, I did say that.
Now, in between the prelim and today, have you had an opportunity to speak to either law enforcement or Mr. Owens in your preparation for your examination today?
Nobody.
Okay, were you ever given copies of your statements that you made?
No.
Okay, before your prelim, you weren't given a copy of your police report?
No.
Sure about that?
No.
I want to make sure that you understand my question. Prior to your testimony at the preliminary hearing, when you identified Mr. Watkins as the person who raped you, were you given anything to read concerning your testimony? Understand my question?
Not today.
Not today. For the preliminary hearing, the first time you testified, were you given a copy?
Yes, I think I said yes.
Okay, so we're clear. So prior to that testimony, you were given a police report, which basically outlined things that you may have said to the police, right? Yes?
No.
No, you weren't. Let me make this easy. Were you given anything in writing, all right? Document of any type relating to this case?
Today?
At any time since you were assaulted?
No, I guess.
I'm not guessing. I want to know whether you received any paperwork from either the detectives or the district attorney regarding your testimony. Understand me?
Yes.
Yes, you understand me, or yes, you received something?
Yes, I read something.
Okay. You read police reports given to you either by, was it Mr. Owens who gave it to you?
I don't recall, no.
Was it the detective? It wasn't Mr. Ben. It wasn't Detective Benavides.
I don't remember.
Okay. But somebody from this side, being law enforcement or the district attorney's office, gave you copies of statements that you made to police, correct?
Yes, but I didn't read them.
Sure about that?
I don't read very well, so no, I didn't read them.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Yeah. You understand that you are under oath?
Yes.
You understand you have taken an oath to tell the truth? You understand that?
Yes.
And that means that, you know, if you're testifying here truthfully, right?
Yes.
So you're telling this jury that you were given documents, you were given reports by the prosecution, by law enforcement, you had them in your hand, and you didn't read them. That's what you're telling them. True or false?
True.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever testified that you did in fact read them? Do you remember that?
Yes, I did say yes. Yes is yes.
Right. Under oath, at the preliminary hearing, you said that you were given documents that you in fact read them before you testified. Remember that?
Yes.
And you just told this jury here today that you never read them, in fact that you don't read. Right?
Objection, misstates the evidence.
You can answer.
Is that a yes?
Yes, I did it.
Now, I'm asking you questions. I'm not trying to give you trick questions here. These are just straightforward questions.
I said yes.
Right? If you don't understand any of my questions, feel free to ask for me to rephrase them. Okay? So now that we've established that yes, you did receive documents from the prosecution, from the police, you read those prior to your preliminary hearing, correct? Yes?
Yes.
And at that preliminary hearing, you identified Mr. Watkins as your assailant, right?
Yes, but he shaved his head. He didn't have his hair then.
Oh, Mr. Watkins shaved his head.
No, the other one did. The one that did it.
Had a shaved head.
Mr. Winslow did it.
Okay. And you're certain of that?
And I was
Let me
not.
ask you this. Are you certain of that he shaved his head?
Yes, when I first saw him at the first time, he had a different haircut. He shaved his head.
Okay. And let me ask you that the hair that he has now, is that you described this assailant as having kind of
That's exactly,
long hair?
except no, it was like more poofy, but yeah.
But you're putting your hands right here by your ears, though. Is it down below?
It was short. It was a short like a bob.
Like a bob. Okay, with a loose
But
hair.
when he appeared in court, he had a shaved head. He had no hair.
Okay, just a moment, let me make the record. She said like a bob, again, she's referring to about the bottom of her earlobes. And I just think we need to nail down some dates. The preliminary hearing occurred on July 11th, 2018, in front of Judge Elias, just down the hallway. Do you
Right.
remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, is that when you're saying he had a shaved head?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're clear as to the date. All right, go ahead. Next question, Mr. Carlos.
So the point is, when you misidentified Mr. Watkins and the lawyer, you were mistaken, right?
Right.
Right, it's mistaken. You're mistaken about some of the things you may have seen, right? Is that fair for me to say?
But not this.
I'm just asking you, well, identification of the person who assaulted you, you were mistaken about that. Right?
Yes, I made a mistake.
Yet at the same time, at the preliminary hearing, you were sure that that was the person, correct?
Yes.
You didn't hesitate at all, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So there are facts that you are clearly mistaken about. Is that fair for me to say?
That day I was.
So let's talk about the day for a little bit. You started the day, you say you're 55 years old?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, and you work, you said you presently work, right? Correct?
Today I'm not working, no.
You have a job right now?
I don't work.
You have a job or you don't have a job?
Today and this week I don't have a job, so I don't work.
Okay. Back on St. Patrick's Day of 2018, were you employed?
No,
So at that time, you weren't working?
no.
And you live with your mother, correct?
Right.
And that's, don't give me an address, but just let me know which street you live on.
Objection as to the street.
Sustained.
Is it from the location where you were picked up, how far is it?
About a block.
Block, okay.
2 blocks.
2 blocks. So, let's take you back. You get up, so what time is this in the afternoon?
About 3.
What had you been doing earlier in the day?
I don't know, I was walking around. It's my day.
Well, were you walking around in your neighborhood? Were you walking around?
I was down towns, probably on 101 or down at the, down on El Camino.
Okay, this is prior to 3:30, right?
Before
Before
I got in on Santa Fe and was hitchhiking.
Yes.
What was I doing before then?
Yes.
Just walking around.
Okay, well, let's,
A little shopping, just walking around, getting exercise. I exercise, I walk a lot.
okay, so you would have gotten up in the morning, like what, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock?
I get up at 5 a.m. every morning.
Okay, 5 a.m. and then you immediately went out?
Usually I do, but not lately. No, I haven't been exercising. I used to go for a 6-mile walk for
Okay. Well, you got back to how far is your house from the places you go shopping at?
about a mile.
Okay.
Yeah, 15 minutes away.
All right, so when did you decide that you were going to go shopping?
I don't know. I just decided.
I mean, can you give me a time? You don't know?
No, I don't know. I cruise around all over the place. I walk around just to get exercise, and when I was, it was.
I mean, you weren't going out to get exercise when you started hitchhiking, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you were trying to get exercise when you were hitchhiking?
No. I just didn't feel like walking anymore, I guess. I don't know.
In other words, when you set out to do the walking, you weren't going for exercise, right? You were walking for just walking's sake, correct?
I was just walking up the hill, because it's uphill, so I was walking backwards, and I just stuck up my thumb.
You're wearing white leather pants, right?
They were white, yes.
Right, and those aren't the type of shoes, those aren't the type of pants you go exercising in, right?
It doesn't matter what you wear.
I'm asking you, when you go exercising.
I wasn't exercising though. I was out. It was a Saturday night. It was St. Patty's Day, and I went out. Period.
Well, a Saturday afternoon.
Or afternoon.
Right. And it was St. Patrick's Day. And had you been drinking?
No.
Were you going to go drink?
No.
Do you drink?
No.
Sure about that?
Objection relevance.
Please, sidebar, Your Honor.
All right, we can have a sidebar on the record.
All right, so while the attorneys are in a sidebar, just want to catch you up. You're hearing testimony, very graphic testimony, that is from Jane Doe number 1. She's on cross-examination. Defense attorney Mark Carlos is cross-examining her. I want to point out something interesting. On direct examination, there was no identification of Kellen Winslow II as the person who raped her. But on cross-examination, when defense counsel asked her a question, it opened up an opportunity for her to say that it was the person next to defense attorney Brian Watkins who raped her. So when defense counsel walked over to Brian Watkins and said, at the prelim, you said this is the man who raped you. Is it still the man who raped you? It opened up the door for that identification. So Jane Doe number 1 has identified Kellen Winslow II as the person she says raped her on March 17th of 2018. Also want to mention a couple other things. She told the prosecutor that she was aware of Kellen Winslow Sr. as being a football star and playing for the Chargers, but was not aware of Kellen Winslow II, learned of his name from a court subpoena. So what we want to do right now is bring back into the conversation criminal defense attorney Michael Bixon. We're going to chat while we're waiting for those attorneys to come back from sidebar. Just give me your general thoughts, please, on what you heard on direct from this witness and then what you saw brought out on cross so far, please.
So let me talk about the cross first.
Sure.
I think that's where we've seen the most come out. What's interesting about it is several things. One, we've seen her contradict herself several times. The defense has been good about getting those contradictions out. I think that's important for the jurors to see that there are going to be mistakes along the way, especially for the victims to make. As far as maybe potential stumbles that the defense has made, you brought up the point that by showing her the misidentification that she made around that first time, she's now identified Mr. Winslow.
Right.
I think that it was important for him to bring that up, that misidentification. I do think that it was a little bit of an error on his part to get Mr. Winslow identified through that process.
The way he asked the question was
Exactly,
problematic.
yeah.
Do you agree? He said, you identified this person, Mr. Watkins, as the person who raped you at the prelim, right? It should have stopped there.
I agree.
Instead, he said, is he still the person who raped you? And then she right away said, no. It gave her an opportunity to explain. No, it's the person sitting next to him. And then she said that Mr. Winslow was the one who did it.
It was a slight stumble, but it has a very big effect, obviously.
It sure did.
Even with that being said, though, I think that so far from what I've seen, they are making a very good point of demonstrating that, one, her memory's not perfect, maybe that she's not being entirely truthful about what happened. So they are doing a good job with that.